Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We got a brand new story to share, so let's jump right in. I thought I had a solid marriage, nearly 10 years together, and I truly believed we were strong. Turns out I was wrong. It all started when I met Candy. She was hired at my company and placed in the cubicle next to mine. My boss, Charlie, brought her over and said, "Rob, this is Candy Gilpin. It's her first day, so show her the ropes, all right?" Like I could say no to the boss. Even if Candy had been 4 feet tall, weighed 300 pounds, and had warts all over her face, I still would have agreed. But she wasn't like that. She was about 5 feet 6 inches, maybe 120 pounds, and absolutely stunning blonde hair, the bluest eyes I'd ever seen. Still, I kept it professional. Of course, Charlie. Meanwhile, my brain was already coming up with ways to keep her around as long as possible. I stole a quick glance at her left hand. No ring. When I looked back up, she was smiling. She had caught me checking. Charlie gave her a nod. "Welcome aboard, Candy. I'm leaving you in Rob's capable hands." As soon as he walked away, Candy tilted her head slightly. "Are they?" I frowned. "Are they what?" "Your hands. Are they capable?" At that moment, I knew I'd do everything in my power to make her mine. I met her gaze. "Very." She smirked. "We'll see." I stood up and started showing her around. When I suggested lunch, she agreed, over cheese and onion enchiladas. At Los Mo's, we got to know each other. She had just graduated from college and had sent out countless resumes before landing this job. Her fiancé, unemployed at the time, refused to move to Colorado with her. So she took off her engagement ring, tossed in his lap, and 3 days later, she was in Denver. "You left him that easily?" I asked. She shrugged. "What can I say? We all make mistakes. He was one of mine." "And how long have you been in Denver?" 5 days. I chuckled. "Well, that definitely gives a new meaning to Charlie's words about me showing you around. How about dinner tonight? We can map out a plan to introduce you to everything this part of the world has to offer." Candy and I dated on and off for the next 6 months. I say on and off because she was seeing other guys too. I wanted something exclusive, but she refused. "I just got out of a relationship," she said. "I'm not ready to tie myself down again. At least not yet." We slept together on our 6th date. Looking back, I regretted it. Not because it was bad, but because it was too good. Candy was incredible in bed, and that was the problem. If she was like that with me, was she the same with the other guys she was seeing? The thought drove me crazy. She never said, but it was hard not to assume. It bothered me so much that I started pulling away. Before, I couldn't go a day without asking when I could see her again. But now I stopped asking. 3 days passed without a word from me. Thursday morning, she popped her head into my cubicle. "Are we still going to Jane's party on Friday?" I looked up. "Oh, yeah, Jane's party. Of course, we're still on." She gave me a strange look, but didn't press. The party was fun, for the most part. But whenever I saw Candy talking to other guys, my mind went to dark places. Were any of them the ones she was dating? Had she taken any of them to bed? By the end of the night, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I wanted Candy, but I couldn't handle the jealousy. When I drove her home, she looked surprised. Normally, we ended up at my place after a night out. At her door, she asked, "You're coming in, right?" "Not tonight." I kissed her cheek. "See you at work." As I drove away, I saw her still standing there, watching me leave. For the next week, we saw each other every day at work, had coffee, grabbed lunch a couple of times. But I never asked when we could see each other again. Friday, as I was leaving, she called out, "Have a great weekend." I waved as I stepped into the elevator. That evening, I went to a party and ran into a girl I had dated before. She was there with another guy, but she slipped me a piece of paper and whispered, "Call me anytime after 8 a.m., but call me." She was fun. We had always enjoyed each other's company, but we had fought over something that had seemed important at the time. For the life of me, I couldn't even remember what it was anymore. The next morning, around 9, I called her. We talked, made plans, went to dinner, and laughed at how ridiculous our past arguments had been. Then we headed to a bar for drinks and dancing. As we danced, I realized something. She wasn't Candy, but she was sweet. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what I needed. When I drove her home, she invited me in. It was as if we had never been apart. I remembered exactly where she liked to be touched, and she remembered what I loved. And we did just that. It was good, several times. The rude awakening came the next morning when I asked when I could see her again. She smiled. You won't. What? I'm getting married next Saturday. I blinked. You're what? You were my last fling. She shrugged. I can give you the rest of the day and all of tonight if you want, but after that, it's over. I took her up on the offer. By the time I got home Monday morning, I was exhausted. At 10, I was in the break room, sipping coffee and trying to stay awake when Candy sat across from me. Stirring sugar into her coffee, she said, Do I have bad breath? I frowned. Not that I've noticed. Why? You don't seem interested in me anymore. I sighed. Your lack of interest in me finally convinced me that I need to get over you and move on. She frowned. That hurts, Rob. You wanted to know, Candy. You asked and I answered. Later, she was waiting by my truck. Can we talk? Right here is fine. She took a deep breath. You hurt me, Rob. That remark about me sharing something with my other dates? Completely out of line. If you have something, you didn't get it from me. I blinked. What are you saying? That out of all your dates, I was the only guy you were sleeping with? Wendy. My stomach dropped. No, I don't think so. She tilted her head. How do you know about Wendy? I was at Grotto and I saw you. What's with all this, Candy? What's going on here? Rob, I need to clear things up between us. This morning, you said I wasn't interested in you, but you were wrong. I asked if you'd lost interest in me because I was afraid you had. You haven't tried to be with me in weeks. And then on Saturday night, I saw you dancing with that woman, really close. It was a wake-up call for me. Hey, wake-up call? What do you mean? When I saw you with her, it hit me. I could lose you to someone else. Lose me? You didn't want me, so how could you lose me? If you really wanted me, you wouldn't have been dating other guys. You wouldn't have turned me down when I asked you out. And you sure as hell wouldn't have rejected me just because you had plans with someone else. Of course, I turned you down. How would it have looked if I told you I couldn't go out with you, and then you saw me with someone else? I had to be honest with you, Rob. Candy, you don't understand. If you really wanted me, I would have been the only one you spent time with. Try to understand, Rob. When I met Walter, I fell head over heels in love. He was handsome, smart, witty, and had a promising career. The perfect man. We dated for 9 months. And when he proposed, I felt like I had won the lottery. But then he lost his job. Finding a new one was tough, and soon he couldn't afford his rent. I had an apartment I inherited from my grandmother, so I offered him a place to stay. At first, everything was great, just like newlyweds. But as time passed, he still hadn't found a job. He kept insisting he was looking, but he was always unshaven and always home whenever I came back. Eventually, I ended up supporting both of us. He didn't help around the house. Then, money started disappearing. At first, I thought I had miscalculated. But one day, after withdrawing cash in the bank, I knew exactly how much I had. The next day, $35 was missing. I asked Walter about it, and he just shrugged and said, You don't mind, do you? It was only $35. When he refused to move to Colorado with me, I felt relieved. Remember, Rob, Walter was a man of my dreams, my perfect prince. But the prince turned out to be a toad. I promised myself that next time, I'd be more careful. By our 6th date, I was almost sure you were the one. Almost sure. But don't forget, I had been sure about Walter, too. I was so sure that I slept with you, but I was still cautious. I decided it wouldn't hurt to date a few others, just to make sure I got it right this time. What I did, Rob, was take you for granted. You wanted me. We slept together. And I thought I had you, that you would be there when I finally made up my mind. But then you suddenly stopped talking to me, stopped asking me out, and then I saw you with another woman. For the first time, I felt like I was losing you. So, what are you trying to say, Candy? I'm saying, Rob, that I don't want to lose you. 3 months later, we got married. We both agreed we didn't want children. So to eliminate the need for protection, birth control pills, or diaphragms, I had a vasectomy. Without kids, Candy and I were able to devote ourselves entirely to each other and our careers. Our marriage lasted 8 years, with only the occasional bumps that every couple goes through. 2 weeks after our 8th anniversary, my brother Tom came to me with an offer. He wanted me to join him in a promising startup. Candy and I discussed the opportunity and agreed that the company had great potential. Getting in at the ground level could be highly profitable. Her salary and our savings would keep us afloat until the business took off. So I decided to go for it. A year later, the company finally gained momentum and started turning a profit. But it took a lot of hard work, countless late nights and weekends spent at the office. Those late nights and long weekends took a toll on my home life. Candy grew increasingly frustrated with the lack of attention, and our intimacy suffered. We went from 3 or 4 nights a week to 2, sometimes just 1. It wasn't a lack of desire on my part. I was just exhausted when I got home. I kept assuring Candy that if she could just be patient, things would get better. Better? I'm doing this for our future, Candy. I know, Rob, but I'm young, and I have needs. Needs I should have been taking care of. Eventually, the hard work paid off. The business took off, and the late nights stopped, except for the occasional emergency. Things at home improved. Candy and I got back to making love 3 or 4 times a week. 3 weeks before our 10th anniversary, I was sitting at my desk at work when an email popped up from an anonymous sender. I opened it, and what I read turned my world upside down. Do you know that while you've been busting your ass, your wife has been giving hers away? Tuesdays and Thursdays, noon to 2. Super 8 Motel on 14th Street. Check for yourself. I stared at the screen, refusing to believe it, hoping it was some kind of sick joke. But at the same time, I knew it would be so easy to verify. And whoever sent the email knew that too. That evening, I didn't have to work late, but I stayed at the office anyway, hoping Candy would be asleep by the time I got home. I knew that if she saw me, she would sense something was wrong. And Candy wasn't the type to let things go. She would pester me until she figured out what was bothering me. At 11:30, I parked in a borrowed car outside the Super 8. At 12:10, Candy pulled into the parking lot and waited. At 12:15, Jason Caton, a guy who worked with Candy, pulled up beside her. They rolled down their windows and talked for a moment before Jason got out and walked into motel office. 5 minutes later, Jason and Candy were in room 214. I didn't stick around to see if they stayed until 2 o'clock. The fact that they were there at all told me everything I needed to know. I waited, sitting in my car, parked right next to Jason's, outside their workplace. I watched as he walked out of the building. I let him get almost all the way to his car before stepping out and blocking his path. He must have known what was coming. His eyes went wide, and he tried to turn and walk away. I grabbed his shoulder, spun him around, punched him in the mouth as hard as I could. I caught him, shoved him against his car, and then beat the living hell out of him. I was still kicking him when a few guys finally pulled me off. I recognized him from corporate parties Candy and I had attended. "What the hell, Rob?" One of them, Tom, said. "Have you lost your mind?" "Not at all, Tom. This is what I do to guys who sleep with my wife." 2 weeks later, I served Candy with divorce papers. She called me, asking if we could talk. "Rob, please. It won't take more than 15 or 20 minutes. I didn't want to hear it, but I told her she could come by on Wednesday, after I got home from work. However, I made it clear that my brother Tom and Reverend Thomas would be there as witnesses. Is that really necessary? Candy asked. "Yes," I said firmly. "As far as I'm concerned, it is. You've already stabbed me in the back once, and I'm not giving you a second chance. Who knows what you might say or accuse me of if I don't have someone to back me up. Please, Rob, just you and me. No, Candy, if you want to talk to me, these are my terms. We do it my way or not at all. On Wednesday evening, I sat at the kitchen table with Tom and Reverend Thomas. When Candy arrived, I gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, glancing between us before finally speaking. You mentioned divorce. Is there any way to avoid it? Her voice trembled. I love you, Rob, and you know I do. I messed up. I messed up badly, and I know that. But I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I stared at her for a long moment before finally asking, Why, Candy? Why did you do it? I didn't mean to. It just happened, she murmured. You were always working late. I knew you wouldn't be home. So I started going out for drinks with people from the office. After a while, I got comfortable enough to start complaining about how your late hours were ruining our sex life. She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. Jason started telling me it wasn't normal for a guy your age to cut back, even if you were exhausted from work. He kept hinting that you had a side girl. Some of the other women said the same thing. After a few drinks, it didn't take much for them to convince me they might be right. I called your office a few times and got no answer. And when I combined that with how often you turned me down, I started to believe them. She took a deep breath. One night, I drank too much. I wasn't thinking straight. The next thing I knew, Jason was holding me in the back seat of his car. I knew it was wrong. I made a half-hearted attempt to stop him, but I had gone so long without it that I didn't resist. In the end, I just gave in. She looked at me, waiting for a response. I said nothing. She turned away and kept talking. After that first time, it got easier. I told myself you were cheating, so I had every right to do it too. One night, some friends saw me getting out of Jason's car, fixing my clothes. Angie pulled me aside and asked what the hell I was doing. I told her you'd been sneaking around behind my back, so I was just getting even. She laughed and said, You cheating on Rob is like robbing a bank because you're broke. It makes no sense. That's when it hit me. I needed proof. I watched you every night for 2 weeks. And every single night, you worked late, turned off the lights, and went straight home. That's when I realized I had really screwed up. I tried to end things with Jason, but I couldn't. The forbidden nature of it excited me. I became addicted to the thrill of cheating. Even after we got back to normal in the bedroom, I couldn't stop seeing him. I justified it by telling myself that as long as you never found out, it didn't matter. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Rob, you haven't been working late for 6 months. I know, I said. She nodded. I tried to stop seeing Jason, but even after we reconnected, the excitement kept pulling me back. I told myself I was giving you all the love and attention you needed, so it didn't matter. I love you, Rob. It was just sex with Jason. Please, we can fix this. She looked at me, hopeful she should have known better. No, Candy, your argument that it was just sex means nothing to me. You betrayed me. You threw everything we had away for a cheap thrill. Did it ever cross your mind that I love sex just as much as you do? But I went without because I was working to build our future. No, of course not. You never thought about me when you were running to Jason. Now you're damaged goods to me, Candy. You're tainted, and I will never touch you again. You justified it by telling yourself I'd never find out. But now I know, and it disgusts me. No, I can't forgive and forget. It was over the moment I saw you pull into the Super 8 parking lot. Her eyes widened. How did you find out? I was so careful. I told her about the email that led me to the motel. Her lips pressed together, and something shifted in her eyes. No chance, Rob. No chance for us. None. A single tear rolled down her cheek before she stood up and walked away. There was no divorce. Candy and I are still legally married. I see no reason to pay for a lawyer when it doesn't matter. If I meet someone worth building something with, maybe then I'll go through with it. Candy isn't planning to divorce either. Not for another 15 or 20 years. That night, after she walked out of our kitchen, she went looking for Jason. Witnesses say she stormed into bar, called him a worthless bastard, and said, You just had to ruin my marriage and take away the man I love? Well, go to hell then. She pulled a revolver from her purse and shot him 6 times. The last 2 while he was already dead on the floor. She was pregnant. She had told Jason she was having an abortion and would never see him again. He wanted her to keep it and marry him. She refused. Jason sent me a letter, hoping I'd throw her out so they could be together. When I told Candy, she immediately realized who had tipped me off, and she went looking for him. Even though I didn't take her back, I got her a damn good lawyer. She was sentenced to 20 years, but could be out in 10 to 12 with good behavior. She gave birth behind bars. The baby was put up for adoption. She writes me once a month, asking me to visit. I never have. I never will. What would be the point? See you in the next video.